Ethan Harrington had never walked a step in his life. At 13 years old, he had grown tall for his age, but his legs were weak and useless, never having carried him anywhere. He had lived his entire life in the Grand Harrington mansion, a place filled with riches, gold chandeliers, and endless corridors that echoed his loneliness. Doctors had tried everything, from surgeries to therapies, but nothing had worked. His parents, driven by love but also fear, had slowly built walls around him, protecting him from the world that they believed was too harsh for their fragile son. The mansion was enormous. Each morning, sunlight would creep through the tall windows of his bedroom, painting the room in warm shades of gold. Ethan loved mornings, but only because they were predictable. Outside his windows, gardens stretched endlessly with flowers of every color. Birds would sing in the tall oaks, and the gentle wind would make the leaves dance. Yet, Ethan could only watch. The world was moving all around him, but he was stuck. While other children ran, played, and explored, he remained seated, confined to a wheelchair specially made for him, lined with soft cushions and polished leather. His parents, Mr. and Mrs. Harrington, were people of wealth and influence. Mr. Harrington owned a chain of factories and had business partners all over the country. His father's life was filled with meetings, contracts, and important decisions. Mrs. Harrington spent her days hosting charity events, attending society parties, and ensuring the household ran smoothly. Both loved Ethan deeply, but their love often became a cage. They believed if he was shielded from pain or struggle, he would live a life of comfort. So, the boy who had dreams of running in the fields or climbing trees was confined to a life where everything was done for him, and he had no real control over even the smallest of his choices. Ethan's room was his entire universe. It was vast, filled with the finest furniture, shelves lined with books, and the latest toys and gadgets money could buy. Yet, all the treasures in the world could not fill the emptiness he felt. He often stared at the windows for hours, watching the world outside as if it belonged to someone else. He dreamed of touching the grass, feeling the warmth of the sun on his legs, or racing the wind. Most nights, he would close his eyes and imagine his legs moving, walking through the gardens, running with freedom. But when he opened them, reality was their motionless legs and the unchanging walls around him. Despite the luxury, Ethan felt isolated. The mansion had many servants, but they treated him more like a fragile object than a boy. They would speak softly, avoid loud sounds, and hover around him in fear of causing harm. Teachers came occasionally, trying to give him lessons, but he could never join school like other children. Friends were a rarity. Invitations to birthday parties or school trips were never sent because his parents feared something might happen to him. Every interaction was filtered, controlled, and limited. He longed for a friend who would see him as he was, not as someone fragile to be protected. One of the few companions in Ethan's life was his older sister, Clara. She was 16, beautiful, and energetic. Clara would often try to include him in her world. Sometimes, she would read stories to him, telling tales of adventure, courage, and faraway lands. Other times, she would describe her walks in the garden, the games she played with friends, or the small rebellions she carried out in her own teenage way. Clara's presence brought warmth to Ethan's room, but it could not erase the invisible wall between him and the world outside. He loved her, yet he also felt an ache when he realized she could move freely, while he could not. Despite all this, Ethan had a curious mind. He loved reading stories about explorers, inventors, and heroes. He imagined himself as part of those adventures, wishing he could experience the thrill of discovering something new. But each time he tried to picture himself running, jumping, or climbing, the heaviness of reality would press down on him. His parents' constant care, though well-intended, reminded him daily that he was different. And this difference had defined his life in every way. The days followed a routine that felt both comforting and dull. Breakfast would be brought to him on a silver tray, fresh fruits, warm bread, and his favorite chocolate drink. A nurse or servant would sit beside him, making sure he didn't spill a drop. Then came lessons reading, writing, mathematics, and sometimes music. Though he enjoyed learning, the absence of friends and outdoor play made it feel incomplete. Lunchtime was quiet. His parents often spoke about business matters, and their conversations never included Ethan. Evenings were spent alone or with Clara, reading or drawing, until the household grew silent at night. Yet, there was one thing that Ethan loved above all: the garden. From his window, he could see the flowers swaying, the trees bending with the wind, and the little paths that twisted through the greenery. He would imagine himself walking along those paths, the grass soft beneath his feet, the sun warming his skin. Every time he watched a butterfly land on a flower or a bird take flight, he wished he could join them. The garden became his secret world, a place he could dream of freedom even though he could never reach it. But even in this confined life, Ethan had moments of joy. The family dog, a large golden retriever named Max, would often sit beside his wheelchair, resting its head on his lap. Max never judged him, never treated him differently. The dog's presence reminded Ethan that some companionship was unconditional. And sometimes, late at night, when the mansion was silent, he would hear distant sounds of laughter or music from the nearby town and imagine himself out there, part of a world that seemed forever out of reach. One particular afternoon, as Ethan sat by the window, he noticed the staff preparing for a new arrival. Boxes were being carried into the house, new uniforms being distributed, and the hum of activity filled the hallways. Curiosity stirred in him, a feeling he rarely experienced. Who was coming? What was different about this new person? Ethan leaned closer to the window, straining to see. He didn't know then that this new arrival would change his life in ways he had never imagined. As he watched the preparations, Ethan felt a mixture of hope and fear. Hope because change, even small, meant something different was coming, fear because change could be unpredictable. For the first time in many years, a spark of excitement flickered within him. Perhaps this new person would bring stories, laughter, or a new kind of energy to the house. Perhaps, just perhaps, life could shift in a way he had longed for but never dared to imagine. That evening, Ethan went to bed with his heart beating faster than usual. He stared at the ceiling, thinking about the new arrival, wondering what she would be like, and if she would notice him at all. He drifted to sleep with dreams of movement, of stepping outside, of feeling the earth beneath his feet. And somewhere deep inside, a tiny seed of hope began to grow, a hope that perhaps the world was not entirely closed to him, and that something extraordinary was about to happen. Ethan had never seen the new maid before. That morning, the air in the Harrington mansion felt different, bustling, alive, and filled with a sense of anticipation. Servants moved quickly along the polished floors, whispering instructions and carrying fresh uniforms. Even the usually calm and quiet hallways seemed to hum with energy. Ethan watched all of this from his usual spot by the window, his curiosity growing stronger with each passing minute. Then she appeared. Amina, the new maid, stepped into the grand hall with confidence. She was young, maybe in her early 20s, with a bright smile and eyes that sparkled with energy. Her movements were light but deliberate, each step showing purpose and grace. Ethan couldn't take his eyes off her. There was something about her presence that felt alive, as if she carried a spark of life that could not be contained. Unlike the other servants who seemed quiet and cautious, she walked into the house as though it belonged to her, bringing a freshness that Ethan had never seen before. Amina quickly began her duties. She dusted the shelves with careful attention, polished the silverware until it shone, and organized the linen closets with precision. But it wasn't just her efficiency that caught Ethan's attention, it was the way she laughed, the way she spoke to the other staff with kindness, and the ease with which she moved through the large mansion. She was different. She didn't act scared or overly careful around Ethan. Instead, she seemed to notice him not with pity, but with curiosity. Ethan felt a strange thrill run through him, a feeling he had never experienced before. Over the next few days, Ethan watched Amina closely. She moved through the mansion like a breeze, always energetic, always smiling, always in motion. He saw her carry heavy buckets of water up the stairs, lift furniture effortlessly, and even climb onto high shelves to reach objects that no one else could. Each action left him amazed. He had spent his entire life confined to a wheelchair, and here was someone who could move with freedom and strength. Watching her was like seeing magic unfold in front of his eyes. Amina also had a way of speaking that was warm and genuine. She asked the staff questions, listened carefully to their answers, and offered encouragement when someone seemed tired or frustrated. Ethan noticed that she never seemed to complain, no matter how hard the work was. She carried herself with confidence, and there was a kindness in her tone that made everyone feel seen. Ethan felt something stirring inside him. He had spent years surrounded by people who treated him carefully, almost like a fragile object. But Amina seemed to treat everyone equally, and that included him. One afternoon, Ethan saw something that would stay in his memory forever. Amina had been cleaning the grand hall, arranging flowers, when she heard a loud crash from the kitchen. Without hesitation, she ran toward the sound. Ethan watched as she lifted a heavy pan that had fallen to the ground with ease, smiled at the flustered kitchen staff, and continued her work as if nothing had happened. The sheer strength and confidence she displayed stunned him. Ethan had spent years imagining what it would be like to be strong, to move freely, and to handle challenges without fear. Watching Amina, he realized it might actually be possible. Curiosity soon turned into admiration. Ethan began trying to imagine himself doing what Amina could do. He pictured himself walking down the hall, climbing the stairs, carrying objects, and helping others. Each time he imagined it, a mixture of hope and frustration welled up inside him. Hope because he felt the possibility of change, and frustration because he knew how far he was from it. But Amina's presence had planted a seed in his mind, a seed that told him he might not always be confined to his wheelchair. Amina also had a playful side. She would sometimes hum while working, tap her feet to imaginary rhythms, or laugh at jokes that no one else seemed to notice. One day, Ethan watched her dance lightly across the floor, lifting her arms and twirling with a grace that seemed effortless. For a moment, it was like she was moving in a world where rules and limits didn't exist. Ethan's heart pounded as he watched her. He had never experienced movement in such a free and joyful way, and seeing her like this made something inside him ache and yearn. He wanted to move, to dance, to feel the world under his own feet. Despite all her energy and confidence, Amina noticed Ethan. She did not treat him as fragile, nor did she ignore him. She would occasionally smile at him, nod in greeting, or ask him simple questions. "Good morning, Ethan," she said one day, leaning slightly toward his window as he watched her from his wheelchair. Her voice was warm, carrying no pity, only genuine interest. For the first time in years, Ethan felt like someone truly saw him, not the boy who couldn't walk, but the boy who dreamed of more. Over time, Ethan began to feel something he had not felt before: motivation. He realized that he did not want to remain passive in his confinement. Watching Amina, he saw that movement, strength, and courage were not impossible, they were achievable for those willing to try. It was as if her energy and determination had reached through the walls of his room and into his heart, igniting a desire to push beyond his limits. He started small. Ethan tried to move his legs slightly while sitting in his wheelchair, just a little at a time. He willed his muscles to cooperate, imagining himself walking through the gardens he had loved for so long. At first, it was painful. His legs felt heavy, stiff, and uncooperative. He wanted to give up, telling himself it was useless. But then he would remember Amina, lifting objects, climbing shelves, and dancing with joy. If she could face challenges with such courage, perhaps he could try too. One afternoon, while Amina was arranging flowers near his window, Ethan summoned the courage to speak. "How do you do it?" he asked softly, his voice trembling slightly. "How can you move so easily and do so many things?" Amina looked at him, her eyes gentle and encouraging. "It's all about practice, Ethan," she said. "And believing that you can. Everyone has limits at first, but limits can be pushed. Even you." Her words were simple, but they struck a chord deep inside him. That evening, Ethan tried moving his legs again. He gritted his teeth, refusing to let pain stop him, imagining Amina's confidence guiding him. For the first time, he felt small sparks of movement. His legs wobbled, weak and unsure, but they moved. A mixture of excitement and fear filled him. Could he really learn to walk? Could he really change his life? Amina had unknowingly given him something far more important than physical guidance. She had given him hope, the belief that change was possible. Days turned into weeks, and Ethan continued to watch Amina closely. Each task she completed, each movement she made, inspired him further. He learned from her, not in lessons or instructions, but through observation. He noticed the way she balanced herself, how she stayed calm under pressure, and how she approached challenges with determination and optimism. Slowly, these lessons began to seep into his own attempts at movement. Ethan's parents began to notice a change. He was no longer as quiet and passive. He would attempt small exercises, moving his legs with determination. Though cautious at first, they began to allow him a bit more freedom in his room. Little by little, the walls that had confined him for years started to feel less like a prison and more like a place where growth could begin. By the end of the second month, Ethan could move his legs more freely in his wheelchair. He had not yet walked, but for the first time, he felt a sense of possibility. The spark that Amina had ignited inside him was growing. He had started to dream bigger, imagine more, and believe in himself. And through it all, Amina remained unaware of the powerful effect she had on the young boy in the grand mansion, a boy who, until now, had never walked. Ethan's world was changing. It was no longer only about the walls and the wealth around him, but about the courage he felt growing inside. And all of it had begun because of the new maid, the bright, confident, and unstoppable Amina, who moved through the house like a whirlwind of hope, teaching him, without even knowing it, that life was waiting beyond the limits he had accepted for so long. Ethan had been watching Amina for weeks now. Every day, she moved through the Harrington mansion with energy, strength, and a joy that seemed almost magical. But one afternoon, he witnessed something that would change his life forever. It was a warm, sunny day. The mansion's great hall was filled with light, shining on the polished floors and sparkling chandeliers. Amina had been tidying the large room, arranging vases and dusting high shelves. Ethan, as usual, was at his window, watching every movement she made. But that day, she began to do something he had never seen before, a display of skill and balance that took his breath away. Amina climbed onto a small stool to reach the top shelf. She balanced perfectly, moving gracefully from side to side. Then, with an ease that seemed impossible, she lifted a heavy vase above her head and placed it carefully on the shelf without shaking or wobbling. Ethan's eyes widened. He had never seen anyone move with such control and strength. It wasn't just about power, it was about confidence, courage, and precision all combined. Suddenly, the stool slipped slightly on the polished floor. Ethan gasped, certain she would fall. But Amina didn't. She shifted her weight, stepped down carefully, and caught the vase without a single crack or scratch. She smiled, dusted her hands, and continued her work as if nothing had happened. To Ethan, it was unbelievable. How could someone move like that? How could someone be so fearless, so strong, so perfect in their actions? For the first time in his life, Ethan felt something deep inside him awaken. He realized that strength, courage, and the ability to move freely were not just things people were born with, they were things that could be learned, practiced, and earned. And if Amina could do something so incredible, maybe, just maybe, he could learn to move too. After that day, Ethan became even more determined. He tried to mimic her movements in his wheelchair, moving his arms, shifting his balance, and imagining himself lifting objects with ease. Each small success made him feel more alive than he ever had before. He began to understand that change was not instant, but it was possible if he was patient, brave, and persistent. Ethan's admiration for Amina grew beyond just her strength. He began to notice the little things: the way she helped the other servants without making them feel weak, the way she spoke with kindness and patience, and the way she never gave up, no matter how difficult a task seemed. She was a living example of courage in motion, and Ethan hungered for the same courage in his own life. One afternoon, he tried something he had never done before. He asked Amina to help him with a small exercise. Can you show me how to move my legs?" he asked hesitantly, his voice almost a whisper. Amina's eyes lit up. She knelt beside him, her energy calm yet encouraging. "Of course, Ethan," she said. "We'll start slowly. One step at a time." She guided his legs gently, showing him how to bend his knees, push with his thighs, and find balance. At first, it was difficult. His muscles had been unused for years. Pain and frustration threatened to overwhelm him, but Amina's calm voice and steady hands kept him going. "You're doing great," she said. "Every small movement counts. You're stronger than you think." Ethan began to practice every day, always under Amina's guidance. Sometimes he succeeded, sometimes he failed, but each attempt brought him closer to his goal. And every time he watched her perform her incredible feats, he felt inspired to push a little further, try a little harder. Her energy had become a beacon for him, guiding him out of the darkness of limitation and into the light of possibility. As the weeks passed, Ethan noticed changes not just in his body, but in his mind. He began to feel more confident, more capable, and more alive. The fear that had once held him back began to fade, replaced by determination and hope. And through it all, Amina remained patient, never rushing him, never making him feel weak, always celebrating his successes, no matter how small. One day, Ethan decided to try something he had only dreamed of. He positioned himself carefully in his wheelchair near the garden doors and imagined himself stepping outside. Amina knelt beside him, her hands steadying him as he attempted to lift one leg. It was shaky, uncertain, and painful, but he did it. Then the other leg followed. For a brief moment, he stood with both feet on the floor, supported by Amina's hands. His heart raced, and his eyes filled with tears. He had never imagined that he could feel this way: alive, strong, capable, and free, even for just a moment. Amina smiled at him, proud and encouraging. "See? You can do it," she said. "It takes practice, patience, and belief. You're stronger than you think." Her words echoed in his mind long after the exercise was over. Ethan realized that strength was not just about muscles, it was about courage, belief, and persistence. And with Amina's guidance, he could achieve more than he had ever imagined. That evening, Ethan sat by the window, watching the garden bathed in the golden light of sunset. He remembered the first day he had seen Amina move with such skill, the day he had felt hope stir in his heart. Now, after weeks of practice, he understood that hope was only the beginning. Determination, courage, and guidance could turn dreams into reality. And for the first time, he believed that he might actually walk one day not just in his imagination, but in real life. Ethan also began to notice a change in his relationship with his parents. They were no longer as fearful or overprotective. They began to allow him more independence within the mansion, giving him space to try exercises, move around, and even assist with small tasks. Though they were cautious, they could see the determination in his eyes, the same determination that had been inspired by Amina's courage. They began to believe in his potential, just as he was beginning to believe in himself. Even Clara, his sister, noticed the change. She was amazed at how her brother had begun to move his legs and shift in his wheelchair with purpose and confidence. She cheered for him, encouraged him, and even joined him in exercises, bringing laughter and play into what had once been a lonely and static routine. Ethan's world, once quiet and isolated, was beginning to fill with motion, joy, and hope. But it was Amina who remained at the center of his transformation. He realized that she had unknowingly done something extraordinary. She had shown him what was possible. Her courage, strength, and determination had become the spark that lit a fire in him, a fire that would not be extinguished. And though she had no idea of the full impact she had made, Ethan knew that she had changed his life forever. One afternoon, Ethan watched her perform a difficult task in the garden. She was lifting large pots, arranging flowers, and balancing herself with skill and grace. He marveled at her precision, her confidence, and her energy. And in that moment, something inside him shifted. He imagined himself walking through the garden, moving with strength, grace, and confidence, just like Amina. His heart raced at the thought. Could it really happen? Could he really learn to walk, step by step, with determination and courage? The answer, he realized, was yes. With practice, guidance, and belief, he could do it. And from that day forward, he made a promise to himself: he would not stop. He would keep trying, keep learning, and keep moving. He would honor the example Amina had unknowingly set for him, and he would prove to himself, and to the world, that even someone who had never walked could stand, step, and move forward. Ethan's journey was just beginning. The spark had been lit, the seed had been planted, and the path ahead, though difficult, was no longer impossible. And all of it had started with one incredible, fearless, and inspiring young woman, the new maid, Amina, who had done the unbelievable simply by being herself. From that day on, Ethan's life began to change in ways he had never imagined. Every glance at Amina, every small exercise, and every step he practiced brought him closer to the day he would finally walk on his own. And though the journey was long, he now knew something powerful: courage, belief, and determination could break even the strongest chains of limitation. Ethan's journey toward walking had begun, but it was far from easy. Each day brought new challenges, frustrations, and moments of doubt. His legs, weak from years of inactivity, resisted his efforts. Muscles ached, joints stiffened, and pain sometimes made him want to give up. But each time he thought of quitting, he remembered Amina, the way she moved with confidence, strength, and joy. Her energy had become a guiding light for him, and he was determined to keep moving forward. At first, the exercises were simple. Amina helped him bend his knees, stretch his muscles, and shift his weight from side to side. Ethan would follow her instructions carefully, moving slowly and deliberately. But even these small movements were exhausting. His body was unused to motion, and soreness was constant. Some days, he could barely complete the exercises. Yet, Amina never let him lose hope. She encouraged him gently, praising every small success. "You did it," she would say with a smile. "Every movement counts, Ethan. You're getting stronger." Over time, the exercises became more challenging. Amina introduced new routines to build his strength and balance. He practiced standing with her support, shifting his weight from one leg to the other, and lifting small objects with his legs and arms. The process was slow, but each small victory brought a sense of achievement. Ethan began to realize that progress was not instant. It came step by step, day by day, with patience and persistence. Despite the slow progress, there were moments of joy and excitement. One afternoon, Ethan managed to lift himself slightly off the wheelchair with Amina's help. For a brief moment, he felt the sensation of weight on his legs, the sensation of standing. His heart raced with exhilaration. "I did it," he whispered, unable to contain his happiness. Amina's face lit up with pride. "See? I told you, Ethan. You can do it. Just keep trying." That moment became a memory he would carry with him forever, a proof that his efforts were not in vain. However, the journey was not without setbacks. Some days, his legs felt weaker than before. He would attempt a movement only to collapse back into the wheelchair, frustrated and disappointed. Tears would fill his eyes as he thought about how long it had taken just to get this far. But Amina was always there, her presence calming and motivating. She would gently remind him that failure was part of the process, that every stumble brought him closer to success. "It's okay, Ethan," she would say. "Every step, even a fall, is progress. Don't give up." Ethan began to learn an important lesson: patience. Before meeting Amina, he had wanted instant results. But now he understood that true strength and ability came from consistent effort over time. Each day he practiced, he grew a little stronger, a little more confident, a little closer to walking on his own. And each small achievement fueled his determination to keep going. Amina also taught him to pay attention to his mind, not just his body. "Believe in yourself," she would say. "Your mind can guide your body if you trust it." Ethan began to practice visualization, imagining himself walking through the garden, feeling the sun on his face, and moving freely. Each mental exercise strengthened his resolve and gave him courage when his body felt weak. The combination of mental focus and physical practice began to produce noticeable results. One morning, Ethan surprised himself. With Amina supporting him on both sides, he managed to take a few small, unsteady steps across the room. His legs shook with every movement, and he felt fear, excitement, and disbelief all at once. When he reached the end of the room, he sank to his knees, laughing and crying at the same time. Amina hugged him, cheering and praising him. "I knew you could do it, Ethan," she exclaimed. "Look at you. You're walking." News of Ethan's progress spread slowly through the household. His parents, initially cautious, began to see the change in him. They watched as he practiced daily, growing stronger and more confident with each attempt. Their fear of his fragility began to fade, replaced by admiration for his courage and determination. Even the other staff members were amazed at his progress, inspired by the boy who had never walked but refused to accept limitation. Despite his growing success, Ethan remained humble and focused. He knew the journey was far from over. Each day, he faced new challenges: longer distances, maintaining balance, and strengthening muscles that had been unused for years. Pain, frustration, and exhaustion were constant companions, but so were hope, determination, and Amina's guidance. He had learned that progress required effort, patience, and resilience. Amina continued to push him, but always with care and encouragement. She introduced more complex exercises, such as walking while carrying small objects, stepping over low obstacles, and practicing balance on uneven surfaces. Ethan struggled at first, often stumbling and falling back into his wheelchair. But he persisted. Each attempt, each movement, brought him closer to independence. He began to see his body not as weak, but as capable, slowly learning to do what he had once thought impossible. Ethan's confidence grew not only in his body but in his spirit. He began to speak more to his parents, share his dreams, and express his thoughts freely. He started to participate in household activities, helping with small tasks and contributing to conversations. The world that had once seemed distant and unreachable was becoming more real, more accessible, and more exciting. He realized that movement was not just physical, it was a gateway to a fuller, richer life. One evening, after a long day of practice, Ethan sat by the garden doors, feeling the cool breeze on his face. He reflected on how far he had come from watching Amina move with awe to taking steps on his own. He thought about the weeks of effort, the failures, the small victories, and the encouragement he had received. And he felt something powerful: hope. True hope, born not from magic or luck, but from courage, persistence, and belief in himself. His determination began to inspire others in the mansion. Clara joined him in practice sessions, laughing and cheering as he took steps across the room. The servants, too, watched with admiration, realizing that anyone could achieve great things with effort and belief. Even his parents became more involved, offering support, encouragement, and praise. Ethan's journey was no longer solitary, it had become a shared experience, filled with love, guidance, and support. As the weeks turned into months, Ethan's movements became stronger, more confident, and more controlled. He could now stand for longer periods, take multiple steps without support, and even attempt simple exercises alone. The boy who had once spent his life confined to a wheelchair was slowly learning to walk, guided by the inspiration, courage, and patience of Amina. Through all of this, Ethan discovered something more profound than walking. He discovered resilience. He learned that the human spirit could overcome limitations, that belief and persistence could transform weakness into strength. And he realized that guidance, encouragement, and the presence of someone who believed in him like Amina could spark extraordinary change. One afternoon, Ethan managed to walk across the entire garden room, supported only lightly by Amina's hands. His heart raced, his legs shook, and a smile spread across his face that would not fade. He had done it. He had moved further than he ever thought possible. Amina's eyes sparkled with pride. "Look at you, Ethan. You're amazing," she said. Ethan laughed, tears streaming down his face. He had faced pain, doubt, and fear, and he had overcome them. That day marked a turning point. Ethan no longer saw himself as a boy confined to a wheelchair. He saw himself as capable, strong, and determined. He understood that walking was not just about physical movement, it was about courage, persistence, and the willingness to try again, even when it seemed impossible. And he knew that he could continue to grow, continue to move forward, and eventually walk on his own. Ethan's journey was still ongoing, but he had learned the most important lesson: change was possible, no matter how impossible it seemed. And as he practiced each day, guided by Amina's steady encouragement, he moved closer and closer to the moment when he would finally walk independently, a moment that would transform his life forever. The day had arrived. Ethan felt a mixture of excitement, nervousness, and determination as he prepared for what he had been dreaming of for months. The Harrington mansion was quiet that morning, the kind of calm that seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something extraordinary to happen. Ethan sat in his wheelchair near the garden doors, sunlight streaming across the floor, casting golden patches around him. He looked at Amina, who had been with him every step of the way, her eyes shining with encouragement. "Today," she said softly, "we'll try something new. You're ready?" Ethan's heart raced. He had been ready for this moment for weeks, but now that it was here, the weight of possibility pressed down on him. Could he really do it? Could he finally take steps on his own, without leaning on anyone for support? He took a deep breath, trying to calm the mixture of fear and excitement inside him. Amina knelt beside him, her hands gentle but steady on his arms. "Remember, Ethan," she said, "believe in yourself. You've worked so hard, and you are stronger than you think. Just one step at a time." Ethan nodded, his hands gripping the wheels of his chair tightly. He could feel the familiar ache in his legs, the stiffness of muscles unused for so long. But he also felt something new, a sense of courage, determination, and hope that was stronger than any pain. Slowly, carefully, Ethan shifted his weight forward. His legs trembled under him, but he didn't stop. He felt Amina's hands steady him, but he made the effort himself. He lifted one leg, then the other, wobbly and unsure, and took a step. It was short, uneven, and far from perfect, but it was real. His heart leapt with joy. He had taken his first step alone. The moment was breathtaking, more incredible than anything he had imagined. Amina clapped softly, her smile wide and proud. "Look at you, Ethan. You did it," she exclaimed. Ethan laughed, a sound full of triumph and disbelief. He took another step, then another, each one gaining confidence. The garden doors were open, sunlight streaming in, and he imagined the gardens outside, the flowers, the grass, the wind. He wanted to run, jump, and feel every bit of the world he had been denied for so long. His parents, who had been watching quietly from a distance, were speechless. Mr. Harrington's hand covered his mouth, his eyes wide with astonishment and pride. Mrs. Harrington's hands trembled as tears filled her eyes. They had always loved Ethan, but never in their wildest dreams had they imagined this day. Their son, who had never walked in 13 years, was taking steps on his own. And it was not just a physical accomplishment, it was a triumph of spirit, courage, and determination. Ethan's legs shook as he moved further across the room. He stumbled once, but he quickly regained balance. Each step brought a mixture of exhilaration and disbelief. He had dreamed of this moment countless times, but now that it was real, the emotions were overwhelming. He felt joy, relief, pride, and a deep gratitude for the journey that had brought him here. And at the center of it all was Amina, the young maid whose courage, skill, and belief in him had ignited the spark that made this possible. Clara ran into the room, her eyes wide with excitement. She cheered loudly, clapping her hands. "Ethan! You're walking! You're really walking," she shouted, her voice full of joy. She rushed to his side, helping him practice longer steps, encouraging him to move confidently. The mansion, once quiet and still, was now alive with laughter, applause, and celebration. Every corner seemed to echo the triumph of a boy who had refused to accept limitation. Ethan's mind raced with memories of the journey, the long weeks of practice, the pain, the setbacks, and the small victories. He remembered the first day he had seen Amina perform that incredible feat, the day she had lifted the heavy vase with perfect balance. That moment had sparked a hope inside him that had grown into determination and courage. And now, standing on his own feet, he realized that her influence had been more powerful than anything else in his life. As the day continued, Ethan practiced walking across the mansion. Step by step, he grew stronger, more confident, and more precise. His legs, once weak and unused, were now carrying him steadily. He felt the muscles awaken, the balance return, and the joy of movement fill him from head to toe. Each step was a reminder that persistence, courage, and belief in oneself could overcome even the greatest challenges. Amina stayed by his side, cheering him on and offering guidance when needed. She did not take control, nor did she allow him to rely on her too much. Instead, she encouraged him to trust his own strength, to rely on his courage and effort. Her patience, support, and belief had transformed into a foundation upon which Ethan could stand literally and figuratively. Ethan's parents approached him, their faces shining with pride and tears. Mr. Harrington knelt beside him, holding his hand. "Son, you've done something extraordinary," he said. "We always knew you were special, but today you've shown true courage." Mrs. Harrington embraced him tightly. "I'm so proud of you, Ethan," she whispered. "You've worked so hard, and you never gave up. You've inspired all of us." Ethan smiled, feeling a deep sense of connection and love. The journey had not just been about walking, it had brought his family closer, teaching them patience, belief, and the power of persistence. That evening, Ethan took his first steps into the garden. The soft grass under his feet felt strange yet wonderful. The wind brushed against his face, carrying the scent of flowers and the warmth of the sun. He walked slowly at first, taking in every detail, every sound, every sensation. For years, he had watched the gardens from his window, longing to feel the earth beneath his feet. Now, he was finally a part of it, moving freely, filled with joy and wonder. Clara ran beside him, laughing and clapping, while Amina followed closely, smiling and encouraging him. Even Max, the family dog, bounded alongside Ethan, wagging its tail as if celebrating his triumph. The world that had once seemed distant and unattainable was now within reach. Ethan felt alive in a way he had never known before. Walking was not just a physical ability, it was freedom, independence, and the realization of dreams. As the sun set, casting golden light across the gardens, Ethan paused for a moment, taking a deep breath. He reflected on everything that had brought him here: the long hours of practice, the failures, the perseverance, and, most importantly, Amina's unwavering support and example. He realized that this journey had taught him more than just walking. It had taught him courage, resilience, patience, and the power of belief. Ethan turned to Amina, gratitude shining in his eyes. "I couldn't have done it without you," he said softly. Amina smiled, brushing back a strand of hair. "No, Ethan," she replied gently. "You did it yourself. I just helped you see that you could. You believed in yourself, and that made all the difference." Ethan nodded, understanding that true courage came from within, and that support, guidance, and inspiration could help awaken that courage in anyone. The family celebrated Ethan's triumph that evening. The mansion, once quiet and formal, was now alive with laughter, music, and joy. Servants and family members alike marveled at the boy who had refused to accept limitation, who had worked tirelessly to overcome obstacles, and who had achieved something extraordinary. Ethan had not only learned to walk, he had transformed his entire life. As night fell, Ethan stood in the garden, looking up at the stars. He felt a deep sense of peace, accomplishment, and hope. He knew the journey was not over. He would continue to grow, strengthen, and explore the world. But he also knew that he had discovered something far more important than walking. He had discovered courage, perseverance, and the incredible power of belief. And in the quiet of the night, with the soft rustle of leaves and the gentle glow of moonlight, Ethan smiled. He had walked, he had triumphed, and he had learned that even the greatest limitations could be overcome. And all of it had started with one remarkable young woman, Amina, whose courage, skill, and kindness had sparked the journey that changed his life forever. From that day forward, Ethan's life was no longer defined by what he could not do. It was defined by the courage he had discovered, the strength he had built, and the joy of movement he had earned. Walking was no longer a dream, it was his reality. And as he moved through the gardens, the halls, and beyond, he carried with him the lessons of perseverance, belief, and the extraordinary impact one person can have on another.